Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. Today is our first day of asynchronous learning, so it's going to be a little different. You are going to be taking notes on this video. We're going to be doing those focused learning notes. So remember that format we've been using. We're going to start the day off with a little joke. Why did the student take a ladder to school? Anybody know? The answer is because he was going to a high school. Anyways, okay, let's get to it. Today's a vocabulary review. We're going to cover some of the words that you have used last year, maybe even in 6th or 5th grade. So a lot of you will already recognize these words, which is fantastic. We're going to be using them a lot this chapter. Our key question is, what vocabulary is necessary to simplify expressions? One thing nice about video notes, you can pause and play when you need it. So if I'm talking too fast, you can always stop and rewind it and play it again. You can also pause if I'm writing too fast. Basically, you can go at your speed. So feel free to do that. To simplify expressions, it might be useful to know what simplify means. Basically, simplify just means to make easier. And a lot of times you're going to hear me say combine like terms. When you combine like terms, you are simplifying. So really, these guys, they pretty much mean the same thing when we're talking about chapter 1 stuff. Simplifying and combining like terms are the same thing. And you definitely need to know what an expression is. An expression is made up of numbers, terms, and variables that are separated by operations and they form a value. I know that seems very wordy. We're going to look at some examples in just a moment. If you need to pause the video to write any of this down, go ahead and do so. I'm going to continue on. A variable, we've been doing a lot of that already with the in and out takeout activity. We were talking about H is for hamburger, C is for cheeseburger. Basically, a variable is a symbol or letter that acts as a placeholder for a value. So it represents something else. And a coefficient. A coefficient is a number that gets multiplied by a variable. So it's the number in front of something. So if you had like 10x, this is your coefficient. The 10. The variable is the x. And what is a constant? A constant is a number or integer that is not multiplied by a variable. So for instance, for example, if you had 10x plus 4, 4 is your constant. It is not multiplied by a variable. And what is a term? A term can be a number, a term can be a variable, or a term can be a number multiplied by a variable. They're always separated by plus or minus. So, for instance, for example, 2x plus 4y minus 10. 1, 2, 3. 3 terms there. Go ahead and pause and write any of that down. I write quite big, so I might take up more space than you did. I also left room at the bottom for my summary, and I left room on the side because we're going to go back and write down some key ideas and questions we may have later. Right, we've already talked about like terms when we did that in and out activity. We combined orders. So we talked about cheeseburger and cheeseburger make 2 cheeseburgers. terms with similar variables can be combined. So let's look at an example. 5x plus 2x, that's the same as 7x. You can combine. They have the same variable. If we added a y in there, that's a y. It would be 7x plus y. You cannot add the y and the x's together. And the last vocabulary term we want to know is the commutative property of addition. Basically, changing the order does not change the sum. This only works, in this case, it's the commutative property of addition, so we are talking about addition only here. Basically, the idea is if you had 2 plus y plus 7, we can add these guys together. Even though they're not right next door to each other, we can move those around. That's the same thing as saying 2 plus 7 plus y. These guys mean the same. That's what the commutative property says. You can move the numbers around in addition, and you're still going to end up with the same thing. 2 plus 7 is 9. Well, 2 plus 7 is 9 here too. It's not going to make a difference. All right, let's take a look at some examples here. (2x plus 4y plus 3). That whole thing is an expression. There is no equal sign. It's not an equation. It is an expression. 2x plus 4y plus 3. Let's go ahead and find how many terms there are. Well, the terms, remember, can be a number or a variable multiplied by a number. So this is a term right here. This is a term right here. And this is a term right here. We have 3. What are the coefficients? I'm going to highlight my coefficients. If you want to underline them, that's great. Coefficient, coefficient. That is not a coefficient. A coefficient must be multiplied by a variable. So our coefficients in this case are 2 and 4. And I'm going to be specific. They're up here. Coefficients in this case were 2 and 4. And the constant, the guy left by himself. In this case, make sure you include that sign with it. In this case, the constant is positive 3. And the variables, those are the letters. The variables are x and y. And were there anything that we can add? We can't add any x's and y's, and we can't add a 3 to anything because these have variables. So were there any like terms? None. Again, go ahead and pause the video here. If not, go ahead and continue on. So the directions for this one ask us to simplify the expression. Remember, simplify the expression means to make easy. That's basically what it means. We're going to take something that's ugly and make it as small as possible. So let's talk about the coefficients. I'm going to highlight the coefficients. We've got -4 and a +10 for coefficients. How about variables? I see x and I see y. Okay, you notice I didn't list the x again because remember, x represents the same thing. If x represented 2 here, it still represents 2 there. And then the constants, anything by itself, the only constant I see is the number 5. I don't see any other numbers hanging out by itself. So I'm going to put a positive 5 there. And this is where it gets a little tricky because we do need to recognize what are like terms. Like terms are anything with the same variable. So we've got negative 4x and we've got a positive 10x. Negative 4x and a positive 10x. So what does that become? I'm going to use a little arrow here. That becomes 6x. When we combine like terms, we get 6x. We added them together. And the simplified expression, after you combine like terms, we get 6x plus 5 plus y. And that is a y. I don't know, my y's aren't looking like y's today. That is the simplified expression. After we combine like terms, we basically made it simpler. We made it easier to work with. Before we had 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. Now we only have 1, 2, 3. And our last example for the day. This is going to be similar to your assignment on the Google Doc. Write an expression that has 3 different terms and the number 5 is a coefficient. So if you were to set up 3 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 3 different terms, and the number 5 is a coefficient. Remember, coefficients are what are getting multiplied by the variable. You might have had something else. 3 terms, so I'm going to draw the line for 3 terms. 1, 2, 3. You might have had subtraction and then addition here. Remember, you have to separate terms with adding and subtracting. And as long as 5 is a coefficient, you could have done 5w minus 20x plus 14y. It doesn't matter as long as 5 is a coefficient. That's just what this problem asked for. Okay? That's all you're doing today. So go ahead and make sure you copied all this down in your notebook and then complete the Google document on Google Classroom. Take care, everyone, and I will see you tomorrow.